Hi, this is Vic with the Health Storm. Today I have Ashleigh Kennedy. She's the CEO and founder of Neurovine. It is a concussion treatment platform using AI to treat brain injuries from concussion. Based in Canada, she went to Stanford and then 2 years ago launched this company. It's an incredible platform. We dig into how it works, the power, impact it's having, but also AI's influence on healthcare broadly, how exciting that is, and how we need to be cautious and make sure it gets into the right hands. It's a great Health Storm. Please watch it. Ashleigh Kennedy with Neurovine. Thanks. Okay, welcome to the Health Storm. I'm here today with Ashleigh Kennedy. She's the CEO and founder of Neurovine. Ashleigh, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's such an important conversation to get going.
Yeah. So as a start to the Health Storm, tell the audience about your background. I know you did some studies at Stanford, then you were in the wearable space. Give your background for folks.
Yeah, so at my core, I'm an athlete. I went to Stanford to run track. I was a sprinter.
What event?
I ran the 100 all the way up to the.
Wow, you're fast.
Yeah. I was.
Yeah.
And so the space that I'm working in now is just such an awesome combination of how the human body can perform and moving into a space about how we can really understand how to improve our human function, both in our bodies and in our minds. So yeah, I did my undergrad at Stanford, and I completed a PhD in neuroscience and one in exercise physiology in France, and was working at the Toronto Rehab Institute as a scientist. And we had really great results when patients were in the lab with us. But we found over and over that when they were discharged to go home, they would inevitably slow in the recovery process or they would regress. And so we were working with...
What kind of patients were you working with?
Yeah, we were working with patients that had suffered a traumatic brain injury or patients recovering from a stroke, and some geriatric patients in the lab as well. It was the neuroscience of human movement and control. And the Toronto Rehab Institute is really innovative, and so scientists were being supported to build technologies to go home with patients, and that was the first time I had really seen that happening. So when I finished my postdoc, I decided I needed to understand more about the wearable space, and so became a consultant and worked with everyone from large medical institutions validating their new technology from scientists, right down to smaller startups that were coming up in the exercise physiology space. And so after doing that for a few years, realized that there was a really important need with concussion patients. That's where I started, and that's where I see the biggest need. They are really lost in the recovery process. You're diagnosed with a concussion and you're sent home. And told to sit in a dark room for a long time. Exactly, told to sit in a dark room, and sometimes also told that you need to be cognitively and physically active. And so you've got concussion patients really confused and anxious about the recovery process, and physicians that don't have data to actually guide these patients. And so my co-founder, Matthew Kennedy, and myself decided to build some technology that would really go along the recovery process with the individual.
Yeah.
And also engage the physician in that process by sharing continuous monitoring data with the physician.
So I'm interested in your experience in the wearable space, because unlike other industries, consumer tech or other things, in order to really effectively diagnose where a patient is and even to make improvements, you have to kind of somehow interface with the physiology, interface with the body. And I see the wearable space as, the bridge to that, the place where we begin. Of course, in the hospital and in procedures, we're doing that. But we can use wearables to extend that or collect more data and actually even give feedback. Mm-hmm. What did you see in the wearable space? Is that an appropriate way to position it, or is that the wrong direction?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. I had a really hard time coming out of academics and moving into a wearable space thinking, how can you get reliable technology from something that the patient is putting on themselves and basically handling themselves, and how is that going to improve their health? It's a wellness tool. It's not a medical device. But at that point, I didn't really understand how this continuous monitoring could complete the picture of health for the person, for their caregiver, their clinician, and how important that actually would be in preventative medicine. So I see that being a really important space that we're moving into with wearables, is catching things early, diagnosing disease early, to lower the cost of care and essentially save lives.
Yeah, and it's I don't see it as binary. Right? Like, it's not wellness and clinical. I think there's a whole spectrum of there are some things that are primarily wellness and are interesting as an early diagnostic tool. Then there are things that are mostly clinical treatment, but you could do at home, and a lot in between. You know, that field seems to be blending, month to month, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the algorithms are getting better every day. The sensor technology is getting better every day, where now we have clinical grade technology that's monitoring really accurately at home, giving you continuous measurements of your patients. And this field is actually turning into a personalized medicine field. Personalized medicine it's usually used to describe things that are more pharma-based, but as the accuracy of these wearables increases, we're actually able to design healthcare plans specifically for that person based on that continuous data that we're getting from them.
Yeah, I mean, at first, in the last 20 years, we began to get people's individual genomes. And so I think at first that's what personalized medicine meant. Like, this screening test or this drug in the pharma business works best with your particular genetic makeup. But I think you're exactly right. As we get more and more types of personalized data, so like my brain feedback loops, we'll get into it in a minute, but all the brain signals that are coming out are highly personal to me and what my brain is going through right now. And then you could change the treatment based on that.
Absolutely. And that's really the definition of personalized medicine is changing your treatment to meet that specific need of that individual. And we're finding that there are very specific brain types that respond well to certain types of intervention. Even within our own data sets, we're seeing there are several brain types, and we're able to tailor the neurofeedback that we've created to actually match that brain.
So when you say a brain type, I haven't heard that phrase before. Is that sort of how your brain was developed, or is it based on your genetics or some combination?
It's unclear. I assume it's both. We've been collecting a lot of data about people's backgrounds as we look at these profiles to see if we can understand what the root is of these differences and why people respond to some treatments and other people don't. So that's kind of an ongoing area of research for us as we develop our products. We've got a pretty large R&D team that's tracking all of this and learning as we go.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting about neuroscience is it's significantly behind other parts of medicine.
It is.
And so we know pretty well how the different organs of the body function, and then therefore can know in what way they're not functioning. The brain is largely a black box. Maybe your team is starting to unpack it or shine light on it, but it is we're significantly behind. I'm really interested in how the amygdala fits with the prefrontal cortex and how they interact, because the emotional response and the sort of the flight or fight response can dramatically change how you interpret the world. Mm-hmm. And so I don't fully understand it, but I'm trying to learn about it because it seems like a really powerful way to help people or to people prevent themselves from being helped.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it impacts the way that you can learn too. So for children who are constantly under stress, their ability to learn is diminished.
Right.
And there's so many ways to optimize our brain function that we haven't tapped into yet. And so that's, wearable technology becoming more accurate. Our algorithms seeing more data is allowing us to get some of those insights for the first time.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, as you know, this is called the health storm. I maybe a year ago started thinking about and digging into several emerging trends that I saw sort of coming together. I just wanted to get your feedback on those. My view is that COVID and the pandemic have sort of accelerated that. So all of these trends were in place, before we had COVID, causing all this chaos and unfortunate public health problems. But it has really sort of brought it to the forefront. So those are, right in the space where you are, technology is, getting better every day. It seems like kind of an exponential growth, driving efficiency, driving convenience, but also driving better diagnostics and better treatment options. And that's going to really impact what we think about of healthcare. So that's the first one right in the middle of where Neurovine is. The next is kind of the rise of the consumer and individual people trying to take control of their own health and have more say in the direction, as opposed to sort of waiting for the man in the white coat to tell them what to do. They're trying to take more ownership of it. Care is moving out of the hospital to the neighborhood and then to the home sometimes. And I'm seeing market entry by really non-traditional players, so like Google, Walmart, folks like that 20 years ago you wouldn't have thought were in healthcare at all, and now they're sort of moving into it pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So those four trends I see sort of all coming to a head in the next year. They're here already, probably in the next year or two. I've sort of called that the health storm. Give me your sense of what you see from your side of those trends. Are they here now? Are they off on the horizon? Or maybe they're wrong? What do you think about them?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. So it's kind of like these embers have been burning for a while, and COVID's kind of just ignited this flame of change, which is the only way that this behemoth of healthcare can shift quickly. Yeah. I've heard people say we've made 10 years of progress in 6 months, especially in the digital health space. And I see that. And one of the points I wanted to add was that one of the key drivers are physicians. So historically, physicians have been resistant to new technologies in the clinic. And they have kind of been part of the reason that it's been a hard industry to disrupt. So there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that medicine for them is not rule-based. It's not something that you can just create an algorithm for and replicate.
Yeah, it's called the practice of medicine. They view it as a thing that they are getting better at and using judgment.
Exactly, absolutely. And even physicians now don't have the data to make those kind of rule-based decisions. And so they rely a lot on their gestalt or their gut feeling about a patient. And then, of course, the other reason for the slow change with physicians is time and money. And so, as everyone knows, doctors are pressed for time. And to adapt a new piece of technology, they need to understand the evidence behind the technology that you've created. If it's a black box and they don't understand why it's doing what it's doing, that's a really hard thing for a physician to adapt. They need to understand the platform, the technology, to actually onboard their patients and how they can use the technology. And then the physician has to become the advocate to actually get a patient to use technology. And
they need, I think they need financial incentives.
Absolutely.
To be compensated to do that work. And pre-COVID, they were not paid for telemedicine visits. Right. And so, as a physician, I work all day, I'm seeing patients, and then I have to enter all the data for several hours. When I get home at night, I'm not sure I want to, for no pay, do a bunch of telemedicine calls. Yeah. And what's really interesting is in maybe 2 weeks, it might have been less than 2 weeks, because of the public health need, the U.S. federal government changed the compensation structures and it started paying them. Mm-hmm. And so then they were able to carve off part of their day, and they were paid the same as a regular visit. So it made them try it, and then I think they adapted to it and saw the value. It's not always great, but a lot of times it's better. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're exactly right. The doctors have to be brought into the process and part of the solution.
Yeah.
I want your comment about patient safety too, because part of it is just humans, and doctors, of course, are humans, have trouble with new change. They're used to a certain thing. But I think part of it is they honestly are worried about, it's someone's relative that we are treating, and they have the Hippocratic Oath. They want to make sure that they are doing right by the patient, and there's patient safety concerns.
Yeah, that's especially true when it is an AI-driven tool that they're using and they don't understand the decision-making process of the AI.
Yeah, and as AI gets more and more sophisticated, is there a chance that no human will understand the decision-making process? I mean, the algorithms, the machine will begin to create its own algorithms, which we can see are effective, but we can't reverse engineer and know exactly why they're effective. I think. I mean, is that accurate?
Yeah, it depends on your approach. So we've taken very systematic steps to understand exactly why our algorithms are making the decisions that they do. And so, my co-founder being a physician, it was really important that we could make that as transparent and easy to understand as possible. But in the diagnostic space, the accuracy is incredibly high with these AI-driven systems, but the decision-making is not always as clear because it's more complex, deep neural networks that are making the decisions as opposed to a process-wise.
And I think we as a species, we are comfortable with saying, well, let's get a second opinion from this expert at a fancy hospital because he or she has seen a lot of these cases and will be able to better interpret the data. That person, that expert, may not be able to articulate exactly why they think that it's X or Y. As you said, it's their gestalt, it's their gut, it's their years of experience leads them to think it's more likely this diagnostic outcome. We're not as comfortable with a machine doing that, even though it's essentially, I think it's the same thing, except for the emotional tie that it's not a human doing it.
Right. And so I have two comments on that. The first is that there was a huge mistrust of X-rays when they first came out.
Okay, interesting. So talk about that. What year did X-rays come out? I should know that, but I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that. But
when they came out, that was a new technology that not everyone believed was going to be more help than good.
Yeah, they had no idea of knowing what it would pick up and what it would miss. Mm-hmm. So physicians didn't trust it. Patients certainly didn't trust it. And now we don't bat an eye, an eye at it. The way I see this moving forward is physicians won't be replaced, but their jobs will become very streamlined. All of the, every area that can rely on data-driven decisions will, and hopefully the physician will be the person that has the final say. They'll become very good at interpreting data that they're presented with. But I don't see us being replaced, and it's because of that human emotion aspect.
Yeah, and I mean, so I think in analogies kind of. So my analogy for this is driving. It's I'm a cocky bastard. So I think I'm a really good driver, right? So whether that's true or not is immaterial. But I have been driving for a long time. I feel like I'm a good driver. I still want interlock brakes to be automatic.
Right.
So when I'm driving, I don't want to worry about having to pump the brakes more than any human could pump it. Whatever it is, 1,000 times a second. I don't view that as an insult to my driving skill. I view it as a way to augment my abilities. And of course I want the brakes to pump much faster. So I think it's more of a positioning and a a way for a doc to be comfortable that this is a tool, just like an X-ray. It doesn't show that I don't have good judgment. It's just another tool that I'm using as part of my, set of things I use.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in these areas that are invisible right now, like brain health. It's if a GP has a concussion patient, they'll often refer them quite quickly because it's such an invisible injury. They just don't have any data.
Right.
And so I think we can make the job of a family doctor a lot more efficient by giving them the data that they need around brain health and mental health. And yeah, exactly. It just equips them to do their job better, more efficiently. And I think it'll be key to improving healthcare in third world countries as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about Neurovine. You launched it in 2019. Mm-hmm. Talk about the journey of launching a AI health company in concussion. And, I think you have a personal story of why concussion is important to you, and your co-founder, and then what's it been like over the last couple of years, having to raise money and trying to get the first person to give you data on their head. What was that like?
Yeah. So my father played professional football in Canada, and he lost a friend to CTE when I was quite young, and so that's what drove me into neuroscience.
Football. I mean, there's lots of stories in football, but football's not the only sport. I mean, I have a friend whose daughter was playing soccer, and this is a high school soccer. It's not professional soccer, and she got a concussion. So concussions are widespread in sports. I mean, football gets the most attention, but across sports, there's concussions.
Yeah, and it's there's been a real shift just in the past few years with professional football players, mostly football players, some hockey players, starting to speak out about the impact that these brain injuries have on their lives. Yeah. So we're starting to see people recognize concussion in volleyball and gymnastics and sports where you kind of just, shook it off and went back on the beam. Now we're seeing it for what it is. It's damaging their brains. So yeah, we started like any startup in our garage. The difference for us is that the technology we've developed is based on 15 years of research through my studies. Mm-hmm. So we had some really solid grounding to stand on. And we were able to recruit a really great staff of people who have personal experience with concussion. So those first few people who joined our team for equity had a reason for doing what they're doing. It's impactful to be working in this space. So we were lucky that we were able to get a really stellar team right at the beginning.
And as a founder and as the early team, I call them the zealots, that they have to believe, right? It's not a rational choice to come to Neurovine and the deal is, okay, we're going to work 3 times as many hours and not pay you very much, and we have a long road ahead. This will be great. And you have to, it's a mission. You have to be excited about the journey.
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't want to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the first things we did, was create a mission statement for the company so that we could really all understand and see on a daily basis what we were driving at. And so I think our early investors saw that as well. We had our first investor reached out probably before I would have been ready to accept investment. He was a physician and just understood the pain point personally from dealing with it with the patients. And so that launched a round for us with angels in the Ottawa and Toronto area who just really saw the passion that we had, I think, and the drive for change. It's hard.
What's it been like in Canada? Because not a traditional. It's not like San Francisco or New York or somewhere where there's a startup in every coffee shop. Has that been an advantage or a disadvantage?
Well, so doing my undergrad at Stanford, it was kind of just like you just jump off a cliff and learn how to fly on your way down.
Right.
Everyone thinks like that. So that's a mentality I brought back.
But in your hometown, that's not necessarily.
No, it's not. But Ottawa's kind of the hub. It used to be the hub for telecommunications. And so you've got all of these incredibly smart business people, tech people, who've been in kind of safe jobs for a long time.
Right.
And so you've got this kind of energy of people looking to create, kind of sick of the same old.
Let's do something important.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of really cool hubs in Ottawa where just tons of mentorship, tons of accelerators have popped up over the past couple of years. It was hard to raise money in Canada. We're conservative.
Yeah.
So no product, health tech, regulatory hurdles.
Right.
It's been a slog.
Well, you can come to America and raise money and then spend it up in Canada.
Yeah, that's the next step.
Okay, so talk to me about the product and do you have a wearable that someone with a concussion could wear to help them understand their progression?
Yeah, we do. So we've got it's a hardware software offering that we've got. It's starting as a really comfortable headband that looks like a sports headband. Yep. It has 4 leads in it, can read your heart rate.
So someone who's not that technical like me, I could just put it on my son or something like that. Yeah. Yeah,
and we've worked with our National Research Council to really streamline the application so it's easy to use for concussion patients, because we don't want them spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to use the application. Yeah. So we've got a really easy to use mobile app, and all of our deep data science is in the cloud. And the first aspect that we're tackling in concussion is getting people active physically and cognitively and warning them when they're working too hard. So there's a huge amount of literature that's showing that activity is actually good. You're not supposed to sit in a dark room. You actually recover faster if you're active. But if you push too hard, you regress weeks in your recovery process. And so our first feature uses brain activity to get people back to life. So email, reading, watching game footage. But we give you a nudge on your phone when you're moving into a zone of overexertion. Okay. So that's the core proprietary technology of what we created. We've got a feature to get you out.
I can feel comfortable that the work I'm doing is beneficial. And then once I start to be overexerted, your application will tell me, you just slow down for a day or a little while.
Yeah, we'll give you a warning and some meditation and mindfulness techniques to restore your cognitive load. And it's been shown to actually improve mental health during the recovery process because the patients have control of their brain healing. They're not just floating. They actually know what they should do and when they should stop and how to recover and restore that cognitive load.
And then is there this may be on the roadmap, but do they build strength over time? Where they would be overexerted very quickly at first, but then as they proceed and they're getting closer to healthy, they don't get as easily.
Yeah, that's right. So the algorithms grow with them. So the more that they can do without entering that unsafe zone, the more they're allowed to do on the application until they're back to kind of full health and ready to be cleared by a physician to go back.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. Okay, and then for people watching that really want to get involved and help, how can they help? Is there a website they can go to? Can they give you money? Can they give you data? Can they be a patient? How can they help?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this question a little bit. There's kind of 3 things that you can help to kind of advance this type of work. And
almost all of us have a friend or a relative who had a concussion, and we wish this was out when we needed it.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that's really changed in the past few years is the awareness of the importance of this issue. Mm-hmm. And so the professional athletes have kind of paved the way at making it okay to talk about brain health, whether it's mental health or concussion recovery. And so for us specifically, we're looking to connect with people who've got influence over their spheres to tell them about the technology, to let them use it. That kind of, we're looking for champions to join us who understand the need.
So athletes, coaches,
right.
Trainers, physicians, people like that.
Yeah, exactly. If you're watching and you have time, we've got several research programs going on that you can participate in virtually. And it's not just my company that's doing this. A lot of mental health companies encourage people to donate their brain data virtually, whether you're healthy, whether you're suffering from the disease that they're building technology for. There are ways to connect and donate your data virtually to kind of advance the technology that we're creating.
Now, can I start at your website, or is there somewhere else that's better to start?
Certainly, you can go to neurovine.ai. I think that's an incredible place to start.
Yeah, and there's a really good video. Maybe we'll link it to it in the comments of this video, but about Neurovine, kind of. But then, is there a place where they can volunteer on your site?
There is, yeah. You can go to our research page and see the studies we've got going and connect with our research team directly. Okay,
excellent.
Yeah.
And so you gave a really interesting TED talk that I want to talk about for a minute. Maybe a year ago or some time ago, maybe it's not maybe quite a year ago, talking about the ethical dance between using artificial intelligence for health and how we would choreograph that to really benefit humanity versus the alternative, not benefit humanity. Just give a quick summary of that. There's a lot of power, a lot of exciting things that are coming, but it also is a little bit scary. And so just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think that the exciting aspect of using AI in healthcare, from my perspective, really is, I'm really excited about the preventative medicine aspects of what we can create with AI-driven technologies, and being able to work with developing countries to actually provide early diagnosis. So I think those areas of AI are just ripe. There's so many possibilities in that space.
Really the only limiting factor is sort of accessing the data. I mean, how you can collect data, and that's the part that I haven't figured out. But if we could do that, then there's a ton of diagnostic things you could do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be data from wearable technologies. So I was a panelist at a Women in Data Science conference in March. And there was a prof from the university here in Ottawa who was working with a group of women, mothers in Africa, who are developing applications to track your likeliness for developing postpartum depression after you've had a baby in rural settings. And it was just like, it was an AI-empowered application. Yeah. And it was just like, they saw a need, and so they were using this incredible platform to make really important changes for these women. So it doesn't have to.
Talk about that example. I mean, what is the source of data for that?
So the source of data are these mental health questionnaires that it's through an application that the doctors would give the women on their cell phones. And so
they could text the questions to them.
Yeah, and they just fill out a few questions, and it kind of ranks it uses their algorithms to rank their likelihood of postpartum depression, and they can kind of support and target women who otherwise wouldn't have that support, who are so rural they can't access it. And it was just like such a practical use of powerful technology, and the platform's exploded. It's gone to, tons and tons of cities across Africa.
Yeah, and that's a great example. There's a lot of places where, for very low cost, you can have an incredible impact on the developing world. People think of AI as a lot of cost and a lot of value, but it also can be used in a very broad sense that it can be almost more impactful more quickly.
I agree, and I think when you talk about the distribution of the technology and getting into people's hands, I know that's a complicated question, but it's the entrance of the non-traditional players in the space that will make that possible, right?
So explain, maybe I know what you mean, unpack that a little bit.
So this is something that I'm not the best person to talk about global distribution, but I'm starting to realize that having champions, so maybe Walmart's not the best example, but having these big players who have a presence in all of these different cities engage with the technology allows these avenues of distribution that I could not do it myself as a small startup in Ottawa. but there's these advocates, and those partnerships become a really interesting channel to make cheap technology accessible on a global scale. Yeah,
so that's right, and that's also a little scary to me. So, I mean, let's get some background, foundational information. I know you and I know it, but the audience, it's a complicated topic. So, artificial intelligence is a broad term. There's narrow, general, and super. So narrow, ANI, is like very common out there today. So that would be like a single purpose AI that is, your smart speaker, and it can tell me the weather, it can play songs, but it can only do really a limited set of narrow things. A GI, general intelligence, I think that means kind of human level cognition. And so almost any topic, you could interact with it and you wouldn't be able to tell if it was a human or not.
Right.
Is that fair?
There's an understanding of human needs and human emotions. I think that's a key piece to it.
So in EGI, it's not only technical. There's an understanding of nuance and emotion and sarcasm and humor and all the different things that a human would be able to comprehend.
Yeah, and it can learn from experience. That's another key distinguishing factor. So we're not quite there yet, where our AI today doesn't learn from all types of experience broadly. It's a very specific data-fed learning system.
Yeah, so where we are today probably is somewhere probably closer to the narrow AI.
Yeah, I mean, that's even what disease
we're trying to get to general, but we're not there yet.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, there's been some really heroic efforts to do that, and we're getting closer, but I don't think there's been a global acceptance of one person or one group who's done it yet.
Yeah. And then there's ASI, which you talked about in the TED Talk, that is super intelligence. And all that means to me is it is more advanced than AGI. So more capable, more intelligent, can do more things than a human could do.
Yep, and it's self-aware.
And okay, interesting, self-aware.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the exciting thing is how fast the power is increasing, and that allows us to do things like help African women with preventing or treating postpartum more effectively. Mm-hmm. But what is scary about it is that once it becomes self-aware, what are the motivations going to be? And are they going to be aligned with human motivations? Or better said, what could we do to ensure that as this really powerful thing gets unleashed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no clear answer to it. I think the likelier cause of any negative impact would be an AI system trying to achieve good goals that we've set for it, but finding shortcuts that actually have malicious outcomes or negative outcomes on the population.
Yeah, so it is. It's tasked with doing A, and the best way to get there from the AI point of view is to just run through this wall, mm-hmm. but that ends up having a negative impact on a bunch of people.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably the more likely outcome rather than the competitive nature of AI or AI wanting to wipe out humanity. When I gave my TED Talk, it's more for dramatic effect to say AI is going to turn on us, but I think we just have to be very careful in how we program it, that it doesn't cause harm without us knowing along the way when we're trying to.
Yeah, so that I wanted to get that foundation just because it's pretty fast-moving topic. Mm-hmm. To get to. I mean, you phrased it as a dance, which I like. I think that's probably accurate. And so what I want to talk to you about is who is best suited to lead this, who's best suited to be the steward of this advancement. I mean, you mentioned a large multinational corporation. They do have wide distribution, so they could get a very effective tool. They could distribute broadly. They are required to have goals to help their shareholders. And I'm a VC, right? So I'm not opposed to that, but I think we need to be aware that all good for humanity would have to be secondary to good for the shareholders.
Right.
Hopefully they're aligned, but maybe a government entity could do it if they think about all people and not only their citizens. I don't know. How do you think about who would lead this process?
Yeah, I like how you have approached the really crux of the problem and gone back to explain from a kind of a bird's eye view. I think it will have to be a regulated, government body that oversees this, equipped with ethicists and scientists, and in the healthcare space, physicians who have to uphold their oath to do no harm. And so there's going to have to be really tight regulation around how it's distributed, for sure.
Yeah, and so let's. I agree with that. It's not clear to me what government group could do it. This is happening very quickly.
Yeah.
And I just think government is not geared to move that fast. I mean, it's exponential growth, and governments are not well suited for that.
I agree. And so I've done a little bit of reading about these champions or strategic partners that are involved in some of this distribution, working really closely with the WHO. And so the WHO almost acts as a gate, or it's a hand-in-hand partnership as they create these distribution models with the WHO. So that's as good a working theory as anything. Because if you take only a business or only one government, I don't know. I'm just not sure that the interests are aligned and it would work. And so it's have to be some kind of collective thing. So table that for a minute. Talk about some of the breakthroughs occurring right now that are really exciting. So why would we not just shut this all down? And I think the answer is there's a lot of, your startup is one of many examples where we're bringing really exciting breakthroughs to people. So like deep brain stimulation, and there's a lot of different examples. What are you watching right now? Well, so obviously I'm watching Elon Musk.
Yeah. He's fun to watch, all the time.
Yeah. Huge claims and all. So my interest is purely in brain health, mental health, recovery. We just know so little about the brain, and we use so little of it to control our thoughts and our health. I think there's really cool neurofeedback techniques that will be paired with wearable technology. So when you're getting dysregulated or when you are working too hard, you just get these nudges. And I see us just being optimized as we move forward. So, we're pretty good at understanding our bodies and have lots of tools to know if we're healthy from our body perspective. But I see our brains just becoming healthier as a society as we start learning more about how to use the full potential of our brains and technology.
So that makes sense to me. I think that a lot of our brain incentive structures were designed when sort of survival was king.
Yeah.
You had to find calories and not get eaten by some other bigger animal. And I guess anything could happen in Nashville, Tennessee, but I'm not likely to get eaten by a lion today. And so like my whole cognitive heritage is optimized for a reality that I'm not facing today. And so I think what I'm taking from what you're saying is we could redesign it with the help of AI to sort of move us into being optimized for the world today, not the world when our prefrontal cortex started, was put together.
Yeah, and I think most of us, like, our lives are so fast-paced and so high stress that we're living like we're about to be eaten by a lion every
we're
day.
in chronic stress all the time.
Yeah, and so whether your brain is healthy or you're going through some sort of recovery process, or going through a disease, I think we can really optimize that process. So some of my colleagues are using neurofeedback in early stage dementia to dramatically slow the progression of dementia. So I think, it's endless what we can start doing with our brains.
Yeah. And then, I mean, you brought up Musk. I think that's, anytime you talk about any neuro AI thing, Musk immediately comes to mind.
Yeah.
He is doing medical treatment today, but he also is pretty public about augmentations for people that don't have problems, but more want to get ahead.
Yeah.
And how do you think about, like, where is the line? Like, I wear contact lenses. Okay, so like I'm already somewhat augmenting my sight, but that has been around long enough that it's accepted. If I somehow worked with you to be able to see infrared, is that okay or not okay? And then do I get that because I can pay for it, or should everyone get that? How do you think about medical treatment as opposed to augmentation? Is there a difference?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you these trick questions.
So the idea with medicine is to get you back to your healthy state. And so we all accept that that's okay, like the cochlear implant, for example. It's a closed loop computer system that basically hears for you and tells your brain what you're hearing. And so it's augmentation, but we all accept that it's okay because
is it true that it's never better than sort of the normal human hearing?
Yeah, well, it's certainly better than their normal, like the person that is born with some hearing loss. It's better than their normal.
We never turn the dial up so they can hear across town.
That's right, yeah.
But there's nothing stopping someone from being able to optimize in that direction, is there?
No, and there's lots of research in, like usually it's government and military-driven research that optimizes spatial awareness for soldiers. So basically giving you spidey senses, some of the stuff that, and it's in practice, like it's in use already now.
So what does that mean? They can sense further away where they shouldn't be able to know someone's walking down that road even though they are half a mile away?
Yeah, so they'll get feedback based on auditory cues or visual cues in the environment. They'll get feedback that something's coming, for example.
Yeah.
So it is kind of turning us into superheroes, and that's where the line, of course, gets
right.
blurred.
Some of the exoskeleton stuff is really powerful for someone who has, an injury. But I might want it if next time I move houses, I may want it to be able to use so I can carry a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, or it gives you, it gets even fuzzier when it gives you an advantage in your job. So you can work longer hours, and it's a fascinating area. I think we will have a lot of ethical discussions as we kind of move down the road in developing our own product, and already have, in fact.
Yeah, because your product, I mean, it is being used by people with concussions that are trying to recover. But I might want it because it could help me know when I need to meditate myself. Even though I don't have an injury, there certainly might be times when I'm overloading my brain, and I'd be better off taking 10 minutes to meditate and then get back to my knowledge worker job.
Right. And so does that give you an advantage at your job because you're performing better? I
wouldn't use it unless I thought it did.
Right. And that's doesn't seem like a huge ethical conversation because you're just improving your efficiency. But it is a slippery slope of how we allow technology to dictate our lives and our days, for sure.
Yeah. I'm kind of the mind that it's, the horse has already left the barn. Like it's already going on, and it's just a question of can we make it as fair as possible? You said in your TED Talk something that really not surprised me, but made me think about it in a different way, which is, I mean, I already had thought through the idea that how much money you have will allow you to access more tools, and then that will allow you to make more money. And so it's sort of a self-reinforcing thing. You went to what country do you live in, which is a whole nother level, right? Like, okay, there are some societies on the planet that will allow this for all of their people as part of their healthcare. And then other countries won't have, and no one will have it, except maybe the very elite that go somewhere else. Yeah. And it just depends on where you were born, right? And how much wealth you had when you were born.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's like, from an entrepreneur, like a selfish perspective, the ability to get the technology in everybody's hands just facilitates the development of our product too. Whereas in North America, we have to think, okay, so how can the doctor be incentivized? How can the patient be reimbursed? It's such a financial game here that it makes it changes the game, and it makes, in some ways, makes it harder to get off the ground. But if you get it right, it makes it easier for kind of mass adoption. Yeah.
And so talk about, I mean, Neurovine is working through the regulatory frameworks, doing the right thing, following all the proper protocols with patients and doctors and government regulators. There might be others that don't follow that same like highly ethical pathway, and they are in another country, or they are on an island somewhere that's not even in a jurisdiction, and they would not have all those barriers. How do we make sure everyone is sort of having to follow the same rules?
Right. So with medical technologies, I think it's an advantage in a lot of ways that the physician is the decider. They make the decisions, and physicians across the globe are trained from an evidence-based perspective, where they need to see the evidence that it's safe for their patients, and the onus is on them to keep their patients safe. So in the medical space, we do have an advantage that there is kind of an overseeing, ethically responsible individual who now, even in med school, is being trained to understand the data behind AI. So right from year one now in medical school, you have classes that focus on the ethics of technology. So education for them it's our safety net. Physicians work as
and it's not a credibility thing. Like if some other technology came up through a different pathway, it wouldn't be credible with physicians. So they might not get wide-scale adoption through them.
Yeah, if you're not disseminating your evidence, if you're not publishing your data and going through whatever regulatory board you can, you're not going to have those physician champions backing the product. Yeah.
Well, it's exciting stuff. So you've been working on this for 15 years in one sense or another.
Yeah.
Are there things that you wish you knew then when you started that you know now?
Yeah, I think I spent a long time in school thinking I needed to understand every detail of the system before I dove in.
Yeah.
And I know now that you can't possibly do that.
You're not going to get all those details. No.
and so diving in, I think, before you have all the answers is really important. I would have jumped in a lot sooner. I think I probably would have done one less PhD.
I guess once you're a doctor, right? Yeah.
So I think that's a really huge thing. I think I also tried to do everything myself. And there are people who do things way better than I can ever possibly do them. And so bringing the right team together, I think I didn't understand the value of your team, really, even until this year when where I'm kind of obsolete in the team meetings sometimes, and they're just like way light years ahead of me. I'm like, sounds good. The power of people working together is amazing. And as an academic, I didn't see it early.
Yeah. Excellent. Good. Well, Ashleigh, thanks for doing this. It's fun to talk about the future state. A lot of my health storms are talking about like all the gnashing of teeth and, changes going on right now. But I think we're going to wake up in a year or 2 or 3, and AI is going to be really empowering lots of different parts of medicine. Certainly neurology, like we have talked about, but there's going to be opportunities in other parts, in diabetes, in cardiac, in pulmonary, and all kinds of areas that AI can really power. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. And we'll follow neurovine.ai and volunteer our data and then keep getting involved.
Wonderful. Thanks, Vic. This was fun.
Thanks, Ashleigh. Bye.
Bye.